Welcome, good morning. Pleased to be with you folks. By way of background, I am an electrical engineer, not a finance specialist. So when I came at this technology 2 years ago or so, it was to unwind how it worked and why. And in the process, I've learned a lot about not only the back end and the language models themselves, why they can be wrong sometimes, and how to work around that. But I've also had the fortune to work with many customers in that time frame where they're experimenting, they're getting their governance straight, they're making a case in some cases to invest in AI. So you'll hear a lot of that from me today, and I will be happy to answer questions specific about the finances and use cases in your world as we go. So thanks for your time in advance. My goal today is to set your expectations about real world status, why the hype behind GenAI couldn't get much higher, but why we're still in its infancy. I also want to explain what 2025's promised and has so far delivered on the hype around a new AI capability called agents. We'll talk about measuring ROI. I do want to discuss, since many of you are in the business of managing risk, compliance, and risk factors, but also along the way, give you some practical ways to get moving. So while we're 2 years into this journey, we're still, frankly, just dealing with the worst generative AI that you'll ever deal with. And so the possibilities truly are endless. I'll give a little counter example to history here. Many say that we're about to get into the next industrial revolution. And whether you believe that rhetoric or not, there are some parallels. First of all, the Industrial Revolution took a lot of capital. And you can see from the fact that Microsoft's building 9 data centers, OpenAI is building a data center, Elon Musk just stood up a new one in Memphis. There's a lot of capital going into this space. So there are many, many investors and many, many behemoths behind this. So it is a fact that what we're experiencing here, while yes, there is a lot of hype, it is a trend that is absolutely here to stay. We can probably more appropriately liken this market and this trend to the internet. The internet really changed our lives in many ways. The study that I still like from the early analysis of the internet was about how much humans gained from having the internet. This study from the surplus from the internet from 2009 really studied the fact that humans get return on the investment from the internet. And this was at the time a small benefit per person. You can see $26 per person per month. That added approximately 64 trillion in surplus. This mainly came from e-commerce and the fact that you didn't have to drive to a store, or the fact that you could shop for the best deals online. This is what AI is going to do well. We're going to get lots of free time. We're going to get time back to do better things in our lives by automating and supplementing our work with artificial intelligence. So this essentially, for you economists and the group, added a lot to GDP in 2021. The digital economy amassed 3.7 trillion of the GDP. That's about 10% of GDP from digital technologies like the internet. So we are at the cusp of something similar here with generative AI. I say at the cusp a little tongue in cheek. If you remember 2004 and the famous launch of the Sidekick, it was a real gimmicky toy, and not everybody but Paris Hilton really got into it. It was really in 2007 when the iPhone came out that mobile technologies exploded. And similar to what GenAI promises, mobile technologies, brand new out of nowhere, created 4.2% of GDP in North America in 2021 and created 2.2 million jobs. So while there's a lot of trade-offs between the risks and the rewards of GenAI, you can use the mobile industry as somewhat of a benchmark, although I think generative AI has much more to offer. And so do these guys, from Altman to Musk to Sanjay to Zuckerberg and Sanjay or Satya. These guys are betting their companies on AI, and the fact that they are is backed by analysts. Goldman Sachs predicts AI could increase GDP by 7% over the next decade. McKinsey's estimates are even more optimistic, suggesting a boost to GDP of 17.1 trillion annually. Whether you subscribe to that or not, and there are some that don't, by the way, and this is, I'm sure, what you're considering in your role. An MIT professor recently estimated that only 5% of tasks will be able to be profitably performed by AI, meaning, yeah, it can do it, but it's going to cost more than it would be worth. That means maybe GDP will only increase about 1% over that same period. So the jury's out, but these guys have truly bet their companies on it. And I think Gates described it well. He said it's very profound, this trend that we're going to see, and even a little scary because it's happening very quickly and there's no upper bound. So with that said, I'd like to get your opinions on where your personal and perhaps by default, your own organization's feelings are in this poll. Pretty simple. Are you yet undecided, or are you bullish, or are you bearish on this upcoming trend? And I'm kind of more bullish than bearish, although I do see the downsides. So do others. Sam Altman, the current CEO of OpenAI, invests in research for universal basic income because he sees the day where computers take on so many of the tasks of humans that some are left without the income that they used to based on their jobs being significantly changed. So I feel that. However, obviously, the fact that I wrote a book and I'm here to talk to you about it, I definitely am more on the bullish side, because if you read the likes of Anthropic's CEO, Dario Antosi, he's saying that because of GenAI, the research that faster, smarter computers can do will solve human problems like disease, homelessness, and or global warming. Now, that's somewhat ironic since some of these computers require the HVAC to work at temperatures that are similar to outer space. So there's definitely some trade-offs here. On the upside, though, I'm curious if anybody wants to vote last minute here. Let's see what the results are, Charlotte, once we get a few about the folks' general tendencies on the call.
$35 out of 42, is that enough?
Sure, that's a good point. Let's see. Okay, so majority bullish, great. It's probably why you're here. Only 8% bearish and several leaning towards the undetermined side. Just fine, folks. Okay, thanks. So let's do another poll quickly, which is the second part of that, which is how's your organization feeling? And this is a little longer. Let me explain here. So does your organization have a position or a policy on generative AI or AI in general? Because there are some that are kind of winging it. So there's 4 options here. 1, you could be encouraging its use. 2, and this is an asterisk here, you could be encouraging its use, but you could have a policy and guardrails. Let's hope that's where many of you go, but let's be honest here. Some may be discouraging its use, still trying to figure out how and what the risks are. And then there are many that just haven't decided and are kind of going with the flow, so to speak. So where do you stand? I quickly created, as VP of strategy of our firm, a position statement saying we encourage it in the right context with the right mind frame and in the same vein as other corporate IT usage. And then we went on to say that our preferred tooling is corporate sanctioned products like Copilot for Microsoft 365, rather than letting people dump stuff into public services like Claude or Gemini. So that's kind of the gist of where our firm stands. Curious where yours are. You've got obviously many more use cases and much more scrutiny in your world. So let's see what they said, Charlotte, on this one. Okay, so even split around getting tight with what you'll permit and doing nothing. Okay, well, it's good to see nobody's discouraging its use outright, but I think for the 42%, you'll want to get your IT, your risk managers, compliance folks started on creating some guardrails. Otherwise, folks are probably using it, let's be honest, and they may not be doing it in a way that's cogent with your organization's culture or boundaries. Thank you for being honest. Appreciate that very much. All right, so let's go into some finance trends, industry trends here. This is from a very recent McKinsey study. I say very recent, it was published recently, but the data was actually gathered mid last year, which in AI terms is like an eternity ago. But you can see the business functions where people are regularly using Gen AI by industries. Only look if you want to focus on Arrow. It's this line here, the column here. This you're in advanced industries, and so you can see where the departments are using this, and strategy and corporate finance actually very high relative to many other industries. So that was quite interesting. And as usual, marketing and sales are kind of topping the list because content creation is so appropriate for those folks. So it's interesting and good to see here that corporate finance is high on this list in your market specifically. The three general frames of reference that I think Gen AI can be thought of is in these categories. One, you can create stuff. Two, you can find stuff more easily. And three, you can summarize things quite simply. Creating is good for those sales and marketing people, or for people who are writing reports. I believe your R&D departments and your engineering departments probably spend a lot of time aggregating data and writing things, and that's for some probably painful, and for all of us probably not as efficient as it might be. These are screenshots from using the AI capabilities in the Office suite, which allow you to create documents based on other things, like notes in your OneNote or messages that end up in your inbox. All the various places that you have stuff related to a topic that you want to consolidate and create, you can do so. My eureka moment was I do our company's case studies for our satisfied customers. I do these recordings and I have a transcript. The transcript is a document with all the things that my interviewee said. I told Copilot, create a case study document based on this interview. And in seconds, it had created a case study that looked just as good as any case study I'd written in the past, with a introduction, challenges, solutions, outcomes, testimonials. All that was nearly perfect. I have to say one thing for those of you that are wondering on occasion why these things are flaky. Generative AI systems don't do quotations very well. Unless they've been trained again and again on the quote, like Lincoln saying 7 years ago, you're not going to get an exact quote back from a Gen AI system. They're generally, and by truth, non-deterministic. They can be random. They're trained on the internet. The internet's very random. The internet was created by people. The people are quite random. So it's hard to get the same thing every single time, but these things are great at creating drafts. Once you finalize things yourself, it can save you a lot of time. This is a screenshot from within Excel. You've got a big table. 80% of the world aren't Excel gurus. You and your teams are probably in the 20%. For those that aren't very good at it, or those that know what they want but just don't want to take the time to do it, there's ways that you can create charts. You can see a heat map down here in the lower right as an example of what you can create without going through all the steps to create and scrub and tweak things. The capabilities of Excel are quite improving from a user perspective. And then the search capabilities, for those of you that have been with your organization for a while, are a big time saver. I often give up after 2 or 3 tries of finding stuff in my email, or was it in my chat messages, with the ability to just go to a chat interface and say, find what's in my Office documents or files. You can see examples here. Great example is I know somebody sent me something, but I wasn't sure if it's an instant message or if it was in a Teams meeting or a chat. I can just search and it will find it and give me the links right to it, saving me a heck of a lot of time. So you can do this in regards to specific projects as well, not just people, but you can name a type of thing you're looking for and it will go out and find it no matter where it lives in your Microsoft ecosystem at least. And then last but not least, summarizing. If you get a bunch of emails, say you're added to the 10th email in a string, you don't want to read all 10 messages, you can go and you can say summarize the message, and it'll give you bullets, and maybe even if you're responsible for something, call that out. So there's some good ways in which you can save significant time. And then in the specific finance industry, there's a lot of people who are adding generative AI to their analytics capabilities. This is an example of a firm called FinCore. I'm not endorsing any of this, just giving you some ideas of what's out there. But as you know, you can store all kinds of financial content in a back-end system, whether it be a data warehouse or in your ERP or accounting systems. All of those vendors are going to put front ends on the tooling and give you the ability to use natural language to query those systems. And instead of having to click 7 times or run a report, you can get an answer. This is easier said than done. The data has to be clean, which I'll get into in just a minute. But David, do we want to pause and see if anybody's got any questions at this point? I'm going to move on into ROI next. Looks like we're clean. Okay.
Yeah.
Next. This section's developing. There is no tried and true best practice for measuring ROI. Everybody's got a different opinion. There are some that say, well, it's a cost of doing business. There are others that say it's an experiment. We know this is coming. We want to get ahead. We're willing to invest in some experimental R&D. There are others who are saying, no, show me the bottom line. And here's a couple of ways to think about that. First of all, what are the costs? I mentioned data hygiene a minute ago when it comes to getting your back-end financial data in a position to use generative AI to ask it what are the quarterly outlooks like. It's harder to do that if you don't have everything in a simple data store. If it's spread all over the place, for instance, you're going to have to consolidate it. A data warehouse, a lake are the types of technologies that exist to make that happen. So your options are to either use the generative AI bolt-ons to the systems that you're already using for finance and ERP, or if you want to use a more enterprise-wide one, get that data in a place where you can inquire on all the things that you're interested in. There's also licensing that Microsoft has a fee of $30 a month for Copilot. People are scrutinizing that with the ROI that we'll discuss next. You're also going to have to spend some time with your security and compliance team and possibly even invest in some tools. The great concern about generative AI in the enterprise is the oversharing risk. What this means is that if there's a file in SharePoint that's been squirreled away for 5, 10, 15 years, and most everyone's unaware that it's there, except the way these generative AI search tools work is if you punch in the right search, the entire SharePoint and your own personal OneDrive and your own personal email becomes part of the search corpus or the data that the search is going to scroll through. So what that means is there may be stuff out there that is unknown, but still a risk. Personally, I went right out when I got my Microsoft Copilot and I looked for salary information of our executive team. Luckily, didn't find it. However, I was able to keep banging on things and found some offer letters for some employees that I didn't hire, which is a no-no. I don't need to see the salary and benefits offers to employees, but because those were squirreled away in a Teams location that I wasn't even aware that I was part of, but Copilot knew it. Copilot found it and presented it to me. So those are the kinds of things that people are spending some time and possibly enabling some more advanced tooling to keep those files from being surfaced. And as important as anything, end user training is key. And generative AI is as I mentioned earlier, an unpredictable, non-deterministic technology. It's not as though there's buttons that you click and the system programmatically does your bidding like it did with a traditional piece of software. So setting people's expectations about these things and giving them a good grounding of what's possible and what is not yet possible is important. Otherwise, there's this likely hype curve that comes down pretty quickly if people try something and it doesn't work the way they wanted it to. You're going to have some dissatisfaction. Training and expectation setting is the way around that. It costs money to do that. And so people are looking at ROI in two ways. One, how much time can we save by using these tools? And while that's a good idea, it's hard to measure. And the question we often get after that is, well, what are people going to do with that extra time? There's various opinions. There was a prominent MIT study done, Sloan study done, that said people won't just go and play golf or start watching reruns in the afternoon when they finish their real work. But you have to ensure that your folks are looking towards value add and moving the business forward rather than just saving time and then doing nothing with it. So that's the first means. You can analyze this and you can see some returns. Here's some examples where, again, in the McKinsey study, there are some time savings here. You can see the darker chart is where their time was saved most significantly. Once again, strategy and finance leads the list, along with things like knowledge management and product or service development. The lighter the color, the less time savings. But you can see in all these functions, they saved some significant time. A case study customer of ours said overall their business is saving 10 to 15% by using one AI tool, and that's Microsoft Copilot. So there are some real examples of people getting time back, and you can measure this. There are measurements here on an individual basis. Typically, we suggest people do, if you're going to measure in this way, you should do a before and after survey, asking people today, how long does it take you to do X tasks? Because in GenAI's world, it's going to take less. If you start to measure the before and after, you have a good benchmark that you can use. Here are some that you might use as back of the napkin guesstimates of what you in your world might save. There are other schools of thought around the individual savings, though. For instance, Gartner Group calls the more likely use or ROI metric would be ROE, return on employee. That's basically shown here in some of these categories because it's gonna improve the quality of your work. It's hard to measure, but you know it does. And then saving time by finding whatever you need in your files, that generally makes people happier to be at work because it's pretty miserable when you're wasting your time trying to find things. Now, in your world and in any industry, there's another way of measuring ROI, and it isn't just the time saved in the day-to-day tasks of writing a document, creating a PowerPoint, or analyzing a spreadsheet. Yes, there's some time savings there, but another and most likely more long-term sustainable and positive way to look at ROI is if you give everybody in a project team, somebody's making a new engine or creating a new RFP response to your next bid, if you give folks in those teams the generative AI tools, and you say, okay, it took us 9 months to create a new turbine design. Now, after AI, it took us 6. You can see real ROI in the long-term program savings as well, and that is far more impactful to the top line than a nickel or a dime saved minutes here or there using the short-term savings calculations. You most likely have a place for both in your industries. So I suggest looking at this long-term as well, giving everybody on the project team AI, encouraging its use and explaining how they can take advantage of it, and then seeing how fast they get things done. And that leads to this long-term gains slide again from McKinsey, which here shows that there are significant increases in places like supply chain. And what's interesting here is they did a 6-month study, And you can see the growth in where people started to get their arms around this and started to save significant or make significant money using Gen AI tools, primarily in supply chain. The other huge jump was in service operations. So you can see some of the ways in which these long-term gains contribute to the top line, and you might start to think of your own processes that you can measure from a before and after perspective on the long-term basis. All right, so a few ways to measure AI, and we get to the next poll question here, which is what is your stance? So are you evaluating the short-term ROI? Number one, are you looking at it in the long term, building a turbine or creating a RFP response? Are you measuring it in that regard? Are you doing nothing yet? That's fine. And maybe if you're not using any AI or spending any money on it yet, you may not be measuring at all. So there's a fourth catch-all category there. So let's see what your thoughts are here. I'm hopeful, although I'm curious if anybody has any philosophical or personal opinions about this, because you are the audience where this is making a difference. In the industry, there's a lot of essays and thought leadership about what the CFO's mindset is about generative AI. Are you looking at it like it's a time saver that you won't have to hire the next person, that this could cut down on human capital costs? Or are you on the side of this is going to be a investment for the future, and our company is going to grow and do better and bigger things by using these tools? I think that's the difference between A and B here. So let's see how you folks think about this topic. And maybe it's C. Maybe you're not measuring anything yet. Hopefully these ideas gave you some food for thought. While they're doing this, I'll check for any questions or philosophical viewpoints in the chat.
Yes, there's one question from our co-chair Simran. She said, for companies dealing with the military data, there's reluctance in adopting Gen AI.
Sure.
Are there any products that are built with a certain level of clearance and will not be available to the public?
Yes. I would say the answer on the latter is when you sign up for, let's say, ChatGPT Enterprise or Microsoft 365 Copilot, there are terms which state that your data is not going to traverse the same systems as general purpose consumers or other businesses. And it's kind of a multi-tenant setup where you may share the same capabilities, but your data is sliced off and protected. So the first question, I assume CMMC is a massive concern, and ISO and the like. There are systems that allow you to be compliant with those services, or with those regulations, but it takes work. For instance, when I mentioned earlier that if you do a query and you happen to turn up somebody's report for a government project that should have been classified but wasn't, that's really not the AI's fault. That's the fault of how you took care of your data in the first place. If there's no poll, thanks Bob for the heads up. Charlotte, if you could launch poll 3, please.
I don't know what's going wrong, but it's not letting me launch it.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry, I don't know why.
Thanks.
We do have one more question though in the meantime.
Yeah, I'll finish that and then I'll go to George. So you can hide data, but it takes work. You have to basically use a data loss prevention technique. Firms like Varonis are good at this. Microsoft has some services around this area where you basically go in and you say, okay, if it's got this particular CUI data in it, or if it's got this particular code or this particular, it could just be PHI or PII, frankly, it can be hidden from these generative AI tools. If you think about the massive amount of data that you've probably amassed over the years, you have to do some work to get that under control, in which case there is this delay and or cost to getting right after the benefits of Gen AI. George asks, how are AI results validated, specifically financial data? Great question. It is garbage in and garbage out in this case too. And I'm of the opinion that until there are more robust testing and validation technologies available, I make sure I can validate what I'm seeing before I trust it. That's easy to do when you're an expert in a field, but harder to do when the system is crunching numbers for you. So George, you proceed with caution here. The fact of the matter is these systems have all been trained on the internet. Your data, oh, thanks, Charlotte. There we go. Your data is used, but it's not the only data that's used. What I mean by that is when you, for instance, ask Copilot to analyze your financials in a spreadsheet. Copilot's going to send all of the data that it can over to your segmented partition of a large language model, a la ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Those systems are trained on the internet, and so it's very it's there is an opportunity or a chance that it will hallucinate or conflate the data and not give you the right answer. So be wary, user beware here. Safer, and generally verifiable use cases are the ones that you should use, especially in finance. Ideating and summarizing, and those are the low fruit. So when you, for instance, put a project team together to build that next turbine, they're going to be able to send all their notes to the same place and record their meetings and have their meeting notes done for them, giving them 10, 15 minutes back per meeting. Those are the kinds of things where you'll be reliably able to use these tools. All right, we've had enough time for poll 3, Charlotte. And not measuring ROI on initial use. Some are measuring it on individuals' use, but more are doing it on long-term projects. Very nicely done, folks. I appreciate that viewpoint. And then 21% are just exploring. All right, that's wonderful. Let's do the next poll right away.
Wait, there's one more question that just came up.
Very good. Yeah.
Gary is asking, what are some examples of the basis of determining the value of the numerator in considering ROI?
That is a good question. Well, I think it goes back to before and after, and the loaded salary of the employee is where we look there. So let's say we have you're saving 10 to 15% of your time, like the case study customer that I interviewed said, that could cut 10 to 15% of the overall payroll, or the I wouldn't say that, pardon me, the overall available capacity of the firm just increased by 10%. So those are the kinds of metrics you might use. The loaded salary or the capacity of the person might be that bottom number, or the numerator. So the time saved over the person's capacity. Is that poll up? I'm sorry, I should have put the questions up there. Here's your questions. Poll number 4. Your plan to charge back. So here's a long-term problem. You're probably going to have these departments coming to you with all these use cases, and someone's going to have to say yes or no. Our suggestion there is to create some sort of a consortium or committee that will say yes or no. IT is going to be involved, your folks will be involved, compliance is going to have to be involved, and then the business unit. So when that happens and you say, yes, let's do this, will IT cover that cost? That's what we're seeing a lot of with things like the enterprise version of ChatGPT or Copilot for Microsoft 365, at least as it gets started. But if you extrapolate those costs to all business units, and especially if you have a project that involves a more narrow use case for supply chain or for HR or the like, is it your plan to ask those departments to cough it up, or is it a plan to subsidize that out of corporate coffers like IT? Maybe it's a mix of both. I imagine that's going to be the case, but I do want to point this out because I've talked to several large organizations who've gone in with this, and they start with IT and they end up going back to the businesses with their hat in hand in some manner to spread those costs. So let's see what your thoughts are. Maybe you haven't decided yet. Mix both, haven't decided. Interesting that nobody's saying business units are going to cover their own costs yet. Well, someone is. That's great. And that's I think the way you're going to want to end up in this field, because there's going to be some significant costs to this. And if it comes time, like what I see a lot of is the market heading headlong towards generative AI and all these new and amazing tools. But I also fear that that will keep IT investments from going to places that they now need and will still need, a la cybersecurity. So I would advise in this group here to keep that in mind, that you probably still have things that are necessary to shore up before you go and follow the shiny object. So I love the answers in 2 and 3. And hopefully that's food for thought for you that haven't decided yet. Thank you, folks. Okay, someone Simran had said if there's chargeback, yeah, and that cost is fine. Yes, agreed, if there's some chargeback headed there. Okay, so finally on the ROI side, encourage you to measure before and after metrics. For those of you that haven't yet got started here, it's an opportunity to do so. The more crisp those surveys and the before numbers, the better they are to compare to the afters of both individual work, but also, as some of you are already on the board with, taking a look at the end-to-end process. Remember, not everyone's going to be power users. So when you, for instance, extrapolate the cost of an enterprise generative AI tool like ChatGPT Enterprise or Plus or Copilot, you don't give them to everybody. There's free and accessible ways for you to use generative AI inside of, for instance, your Microsoft tenant. If you just go to copilot.microsoft.com and you're logged in to your work account, you can use a generative AI tool that's secure. It's got the backing of what Microsoft calls enterprise data protection, which is the little green checkbox that you'll see if you go to copilot.microsoft.com. You'll see a little green checkbox. That means that whatever you send and receive is not going out to the internet to share or train the models or to be commingled with other organizations or consumers' data. That's good enough for a lot of people. So you don't need to give everybody a full license. You might just get by with a copilot.microsoft.com for a good chunk of people. You can still put a document up there. You can still load a spreadsheet and say, give me your thoughts on the pro forma analysis of our financial records. And it'll be safe and not shared. You just have to kind of attach the file instead of asking the system to go and search for it in your OneDrive or SharePoint. And last but not least, and this transitions me to the next and most trending topic of generative AI, is the narrower the data set, the more reliable your generative AI or LLM, pardon the jargon, is the large language model that supports the AI technologies. The more narrow the data, the better. You're likely to find that if the data is too large, like if you're just to say, hey, how should I prepare for the next meeting, and that's the query that you give your Copilot, it's going to look everywhere, and it, first of all, it won't know what meeting you're talking about, so you have to be narrow or fixed that statement. But you would more likely be saying, how can I prepare based on my meeting notes and these emails about the meeting? The narrower, the better. And that gets us into a topic of the day called agents. Now, agents are essentially small bits of software that are purpose-built to either alongside a human or instead of a human, in some cases, take action. Just think of the smallest bits or composable software that you can orchestrate in a way that will help you get work done without people necessarily having to be involved. This is Gartner's 2025 trending topic of the year. McKinsey and IBM agree. It's essentially an AI-enabled assistant, unlike a ChatGPT chat or a Copilot chatbot. The agents don't have to invoke or be started or work with a human at all, so it can be autonomous. A couple good examples here in your world, while I bring up one that I'll show you from that I built. The capabilities of the agents in your world might be to look at a compliance framework and say, okay, we're about to launch this RFP. Is it compliant with our standards? So you have an input, which is the RFP response that you're providing. And then you have a benchmark, i.e. a standards document that says it has to have this, that, and the other thing. And then because it's all just comparing text, you can send this RFP response to a system that says, okay, does it meet all these boxes? Check, check, check. Another example would be if you have invoices coming in or POs going out, and you need to check various standards and aspects of those documents, you can load up your source or your source of truth, the thing that you need to compare it against. And then for every invoice or every PO in or out, you can send it to the AI and it will say, yep, this is exactly what we're looking for, or nope, this is missing, or this is out of order, doesn't match. Those are a couple of examples on the finance side. But I also want to give you something super simple. The way in which these generative AI tools are set up, and this is an example of an agent, simple one. I basically, in 5 minutes, pointed a chat bot to a couple of sites that I thought might be of interest to folks in your shoes, if nothing else, simply because they are tools that you guys are generally familiar with. You can kind of see what I built here, little chats that I've pointed to the Federal Reserve's website, and I have pointed them to FASB for accounting code changes and such. So if you have use cases for stuff like this inside of your organization, it's pretty simple to set up. So I'm now pulling information based on what information is in the Fed. It gives me the link. So this would take me to the Federal Reserve's website. Will they increase rates at the next meeting? This is kind of a spicy question, but we'll see what the Federal Reserve's minutes have to say. So you can ask these general purpose questions, and instead of me going out to poke around on things, either internally or externally, I'm able to save a heck of a lot of time. And you can point this at several different sources. What are 2025's, I think it's an ASU accounting code. Let's see if I get that term right. Yeah, I'm going to FASB this time, it looks like. And it's given me a couple that I can then go and deeper dive research into. So you can kind of get the idea here. This is more than just summarize my email or compare these codes. This is why the industry is so excited and why this has got so much potential for us, because now I've made my world a whole lot more efficient. I've gotten smarter instantly, and this elevates our game and is why many predict this will improve GDP. Because if I've got all this at my fingertips, now what can I do? If I'm a creative person with a good drive, I can go on and do many, many other things with my time. So hopefully that gives you a few more ideas. This, by the way, is a free capability in the Microsoft 365 Copilot experience that I can set up with, as I mentioned, about 5 minutes of time. And in doing so, perhaps save a heck of a lot of time. The way I did that was I went over into set up the Insights bot, and I instructed it on what to do. And this is all no code. This is a something that you could do without a whole lot of programming experience. I pointed it at the 2 websites that I want to be the source. These could be your HR policy website, where your HR or your SharePoint site, where your HR dumps its policies. This could be the site that you keep your golden copy of the RFP compliance checklist, and you upload a file to this bot and the bot checks. So this is kind of how you would, very simply set up a bot. The key thing is these instructions and the depth of the instructions are important, not just to tell it what to do, but what not to do. So if I go back to my bot and ask it, who is Chris Stegh? It should say, who knows? He's not a FOMC member. And you need to train it to do things, not to do things to conflate. Oh, there it goes. That got me, it somehow looked into my tenant to get that. Who is the governor of the Midwest? FOMC. So you can get easily answered questions here to take your team and make them a little more productive. All right, I'm gonna go back to my deck and wrap things up. Any questions, comments, or concerns about agents that came in there, David? Because you've probably seen all this. It's in the Wall Street Journal regularly, and happy to answer any real world questions that you might have about that if you would like to type some in. Thank you. All right, let's move to as strategists in your organization and people that are in positions where there's a lot of moving parts. We have this maturity model for you to consider. Every organization is at different parts of their AI maturity in various aspects. First, their culture, where they may or may not have the culture for AI, frankly. Business alignment. Is the organization's business set up to fully take advantage of AI? Do they have the right tools? Do they manage their data well? And do they have governance processes in place? The first stage of the AI model is you're really not sure about anything. You're just kind of checking things out. Maybe for those of you that are here in that 50%, that may be you. Others may be experimenting. And that means that you're starting to think of AI as a tool, not just as a toy. You're starting to get business teams involved in the vision. There, you're doing some proofs of concept. You're starting to think about how to manage your data better, and you're starting to think about governance more. Now you're really maturing here into standardization. I'm not going to go into every detail here, but you get the idea. You can move yourself forward if you start to assess your maturity in these 5 critical areas. Culture is important. Executive leadership is massive. Business alignment is important. If the business isn't, information worker or knowledge worker industry, then it's probably not a great business fit. I can't see dentists getting a whole lot of use out of generative AI. But you've got to have the tech and tools. You've got to manage your data well. And as you go forward, that's a critical aspect of it. Having that data in a centralized, clean location is helpful. And then governing, how do you support this stuff? How do you manage the fact that some people will want free reign on everything, but you can't allow that? Those are all the things to consider in the governance model. And of course, you want to move towards a competitive advantage by using these tools. And then there's this nifty mapping that you can do to move yourself from A to B and how you get there. There's some prescriptive guidance that we have around how to get yourself better on a champions network for cultural improvements and how to set up your data right and manage that sensitive data on the tech path. And then managing the people and process and policy side is another roadmap item. So there's some suggestions there. There's a e-guide that if anybody's interested, I'll be willing to share that with you folks so you can read along. All right, so we're going to kind of wrap it up with some best practices and thoughts. I mentioned an AI committee of some sort. Call it a center of excellence if you want to be trendy. But this is a group of people that will help make decisions. Otherwise, there's going to be some scattershot approach across the org. There's going to be people coming to you out of the blue asking for investments. Having some team that will help make those decisions and help govern and secure this world in which we're going to live is important. Deciding on hurdle rates and chargeback in your world is important. You don't want to just be the department of no. You want to have an ability to create new innovations and support them, but having some sort of an idea of how to measure that. Mapping and tracking progress towards your roadmap and your maturity is important. But to get a quick win, you may want to narrow the focus. I've got a lot of companies coming to me with all these ideas about big projects that would require consolidation of data and a lot of cleanup of stuff that they really haven't done for years. AI is only going to exacerbate those data hygiene problems that you're suffering. If you could get a quick win, and I showed you one with the FOMC and FASB website. If you do that internally for your employees to get access to company policies, for instance, it's going to be an obvious win and an easy one at that. And then lead by example. And I leave you with the CEO of a firm here, and I'm hoping that when I shared sound. Let me double check. Share sound. Share. Hopefully this gentleman, his name's Dr. Dana Anderson, leaves you with some food for thought about the importance of leadership in taking a active role in your journey. Let's see if I can get this to play. There's a lot of buzz about Gen AI, Dr. Anderson, and if you were having coffee with someone else in a industry such as yours, serving constituents such as yours, what would you recommend they do?
Probably work from the inside out. How are you using tools like this yourself, and how is it showing up in your work? And as a leader of change, which all of us are at some form or another, the executive sponsor, the champion of change, is the most predictive indicator of success for any new initiative. So if you're not actively embracing AI yourself and able to demonstrate how it's affecting your work and your life, it's going to have an impact on your organization's change. To work with members of your community and to develop a vision about where you see yourselves growing toward, and answering the questions, why now, and what's in it for me, for members of your team, to help them embrace and adopt AI. But also to be mindful of the resistance, and some of it is very appropriate. The concerns that folks have about security risks, about the deep fake things that are going on, that others are using AI for bad purposes. Prepare your organization to be defended well, so that you don't end up with a significant hole in your plans for moving forward, because embracing AI, because of all the good it does for you, would certainly move you forward. But if you had a traumatic negative experience, it might produce an awful lot of, it'd be more than a hiccup. It could be a major hurdle to overcome. So being intentional about preparing your organization for that is another strategy.
Thank you, Dr. Dana Anderson, for your insight. All right, and thank you, folks. Thank you, David, for the opportunity, Simran for your co-hosting, and Charlotte for setting it up. Hopefully this was a good grounding for you folks and kind of the current state of things, and appreciate everybody's interest.